Welcome to this brand new series. In this series I will be covering various Opel models fully in depth. To start off the series we will be talking about the great success and interesting history of the Opel Olympia that was produced between 1935 and 1953. Before we start off, don't forget to like and subscribe for more and comment which model you want to see next. The Opel Olympia was the successor of the Opel 1.3 liter and was the first Opel to be produced in mass production. Marketing-wise, the Olympia began its life at the International Automobile Motorcycle Exhibition, or otherwise known as IAMA, in Berlin in February 1935. And was promised to cost around 2,500 German marks, or around 12,500 euros in 2023. After the IAMA, the real marketing for the vehicle began at the end of April 1935. Back then it was only possible to get the Olympia as a cabriolet sedan. It took up to November 1935 for the car to be able to be delivered as a two-door sedan. Eventually, in 1936, marketing for the car was used at its successful launch at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. This caused a lot of attention towards the car from German as well as foreigners. The car received its name for the 1936 Olympic Games that were covered in Berlin and was revolutionary for Opel because, as mentioned earlier, it wasn't only the first Opel to reach mass production, it was also the first Opel to have a self-carrying body and to work with crumple zones. Due to the Second World War, the Olympia received multiple different models. The first Olympia model, known as Type 13237, was produced between 1935 and 1938 and was the only model to have the 1.3 liter engine. The models after this all received a 1.5 liter engine. The second Olympia model, also known as the model OL38, was produced between 1938 and 1949. These first two models were both made and technically designed and produced before war. The OL38 model wasn't that different after the war, as it was before the war. The third Olympia model, also known as Type 1950, was produced between 1950 and 1953 and was the last Opel Olympia, with the other last Olympia being a more luxurious rebadged Kadett B. The second model was the longest running model and was the first model to adapt the 1.5 liter engine. The model's first introduction was in December 1937 and was officially presented at the Berlin Motor Show in February 1938. This model was bigger than the model before, had more power because of the bigger engine, and it was available in more body styles than before. Available models in 1937 were quite similar to each other, with the two-door saloon costing around 2,675 German marks or around 21,000 euros, the four-door saloon costing 2,950 German marks or around 23,500 euros, and the two-door cabriolet costing 2,750 German marks or around 21,500 euros. By the time the German government ordered Opel to stop the production of all civilian vehicles in October 1940, Opel had already produced 168,875 Olympias since 1935, 81,661 Olympias with the 1.3 liter engine and 87,214 Olympias with the 1.5 liter engine. These models were produced up to October 1940, were either powered by an improved 1.3 liter engine taken from the Opel 1.3 liter, used between 1935 and 1937, which makes 24 horsepower, 80 Nm and was fitted with a 3-speed manual transmission, and eventually the improved 1.3 liter, used between 1936 and 1937, makes 29 horsepower, again 80 Nm, that was now fitted with a 4-speed manual transmission, and has a top speed of 95 km an hour. Or the cars were powered by a 1.5 liter engine, which was used for the second model that was delivered since 1938 and made over 30% more power in horsepower as the car now made 37 horsepower and 88 Newton meters instead of 80 Newton meters and 24 or 29 horsepower. The Olympia now was also available to achieve a top speed above 100 km an hour, as it could now achieve a top speed of 112 km an hour. It wasn't fast, as the 0 to 100 km an hour time was 40 seconds, but it was a valuable car with good specifications for its price, as it has an average fuel consumption of 9.9 liters per 100 km, which was a bit more than the 8.5 liters per 100 km that the 1.3 liter had, but now it had a lot more power. It was more progressive than its competitors at its time. For example, the competition for Opel in 1937 had quite comparable or even worse specifications. The Volkswagen Beetle, for example, at the time had a 1-liter engine that produced 25 horsepower, and the top speed of this vehicle would not even hit 100 km an hour. The 1934 to 1937 BMW 315 Saloon that made 34 horsepower via a 1.5 liter 6-cylinder engine that had a top speed of 100 km an hour, and also another competitor was a Mercedes-Benz that had a 1931 Mercedes-Benz 130 that was powered by a 1.3 liter engine that made 26 horsepower and a top speed of 92 km an hour, or the 170h, also offered by Mercedes-Benz, which looked like the 130 but with a bigger engine, made between 1936 and 1939. Powered by a 1.7 liter that made 37 horsepower, just like the Olympia. This vehicle had 100 Newton meters and had a top speed of 110 km an hour. Even though the 130 and 170h looked quite similar to the Volkswagen Beetle, they were way more expensive, and also way more expensive than the Opel Olympia, costing up to 4,250 German marks, or more than 20,000 euro in today's money. Way more expensive than the Opel, and really not that comparable at that point, only specification wise. The best competitor for the Opel Olympia could be related with the 1935 to 1940 Ford Eiffel, that was powered with a 1.2 liter 4-cylinder that made 34 horsepower and 71 Newton meters via a 3-speed manual gearbox, reaching a top speed of 100 km an hour. Just like the Opel Olympia, this model was also quite successful, with 62,495 units made between 1935 and 1940, making it more comparable with the Olympia than BMW or Mercedes-Benz. During the war, the Opel production plant in Rüsselsheim was severely damaged, being bombed by the Allies in 1944. Because of the bombing, Opel had to invest in reconstructing the production plant for the future production of vehicles. Later in 1950, this whole power plant was rebuilt. It was announced in November 1947 that production of the Olympia would be resumed. Eventually, it took Opel more than 7 years to resume the production of severe vehicles at the time, and as the Olympia's production was resumed in December 1947, 1 month after the first announcement was made. It was the first model which's production was resumed after the war. Opel wanted to resume the production of the Kapitan as well, because it already resumed the production of the Opel Blitz since July 1946. Kapitan and the Blitz both used the same engines, but due to the regulations, Opel could not produce civilian vehicles with bigger engines than 1.5 liters. After the war, only the 2-door Olympia was produced, with the same engine and gearbox as before the war, but with a different, less fragile suspension. Also, the exterior of the car remained the same until the 3rd model. In 1948, the price of an Olympia was 6,785 German marks, or around 19,700 euros in 2023. The 2nd model, the OL38, remained in production up until December 1949, with 25,952 units being made up until that point. 20 in 1947, 5,762 in 1948, and 20,170 units in 1949. In 1950, the OL38 model was finally replaced with the Type 1950 model. That was also the last real model for the Opel Olympia. This model had a lot of differences from the last model, as the model grew in size. It gained 3 centimeters in length and 6 centimeters in width. This model was offered as a combi, panel van, a saloon, and a convertible. The gearbox was also updated, as the 4-speed manual gearbox was replaced by a 3-speed steering wheel operated gearbox. Between 1950 and 1951, 42,461 saloons were made, 3,140 convertibles and 5,890 panel vans. The prices of the last model of the Olympia varied from 6,400 German marks for the saloon, or 19,200 euros in 2023, to 6,600 German marks for the convertible, or 19,750 euros, and 7,350 German marks for the panel van, or 22,000 euros in 2023. In 1951, the engine of the Olympia received a small increase in power, as the engine now produced 39 instead of 37 horsepower, but still at 3,500 RPM. This led to a small difference, as the car's 0 to 100 time was now 39 seconds instead of 40 seconds. The panel van / combi variant did this in 52 seconds. The fuel consumption was now around 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers, and between 1951 and 1953, 81,283 saloons, 6,036 convertibles, and 22,390 panel van or combis were made. The rear of the car was also facelifted in 1951, as the rear window was now much bigger and the boot of the vehicle was more integrated into the body of the vehicle. Competition for the Opel Olympia OL38 and Type 1950, for example, were the Ford Taunus G73A that was produced between 1958, 1948 and 1952 and was powered by a 1.2 liter producing 34 horsepower and 70 Newton meters, which had a top speed of 105 km an hour and a 0 to 100 time of 55.7 seconds. Eventually in 1953 the production of the Olympia was discontinued and its successor was the Olympia Record. The Olympia name received a name revival in 1967 that was used up to 1970. It was rebadged more luxurious Kadett B that had engines varying from 1.1 liter with 60 horsepower to a 1.9 liter with 102 horsepower. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more videos in the future, please like and subscribe and tell me what vehicles you want to see next. In the next video I will be talking about the Olympia Record, as I will be telling the whole history of the vehicle. Stay tuned and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.